I stood at the podium in the community center, my voice steady as I read from the official document in my hands. Notice of violation. Case number 4729. Karen Mitchell, as president of the Willowbrook Estates, HOA, you are hereby fined $10,000 for multiple breaches of Municipal Code Sections 12.3, 15.7, and 22(9). The room fell into complete silence. You could have heard a pin drop on the polished floor. Karen's face shifted from its usual smug expression to pure shock, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Just 1 week earlier, she had stood in this very same spot, gleefully announcing that she was fining me $2,000 for fishing in what she claimed was a protected pond. It all started when I moved into Willowbrook Estates 3 months ago. The realtor had shown me the beautiful lakeside community with its winding paths, manicured lawns, and, most importantly, the serene pond at the heart of the neighborhood. As someone who found peace in fishing, it seemed like paradise. The morning mist rising off the water, the gentle splash of bass breaking the surface, it was everything I had dreamed of when leaving the chaos of downtown behind. I had barely unpacked my boxes when I grabbed my fishing rod and headed down to the pond for some early morning relaxation. That first cast into the water felt like coming home. The sun was just beginning to peek through the trees, painting golden streaks across the rippling surface. I caught and released 3 beautiful largemouth bass that morning, each one fighting with a vigor that made fishing such a joy. Other residents walked by with their dogs. Some waved, while others stopped to chat about the best spots around the pond. It felt like I had found my place in this community. Little did I know that my peaceful morning ritual had already caught the attention of someone who would make my life considerably more complicated. The letter arrived exactly 1 week after I moved in. Official HOA letterhead on thick, cream-colored paper that felt expensive between my fingers. Dear Mr. Thompson, began in typed precision. This letter serves as official notice of violation of Willowbrook Estates HOA Covenant, Section 47B, Subsection 3. Fishing in the community pond is strictly prohibited as per the Protected Waterway Act established by this board. You have been assessed a fine of $2,000, payable within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in additional penalties and possible legal action. At the bottom, in bold blue ink that seemed to scream authority, was Karen Mitchell's signature along with her title, President, Willowbrook Estates, HOA. I read the letter 3 times, certain I was missing something. $2,000 for fishing? The amount was absurd, but more concerning was this Protected Waterway Act I had never heard of. I immediately pulled out my closing documents, searching through the HOA bylaws and covenants I had received. There was no mention of fishing restrictions anywhere. The pond was listed as a community amenity, open to all residents for recreational use. Something didn't add up, and I decided it was time to meet this Karen Mitchell face to face. Her house sat at the corner of Maple and Oak, a colonial-style home with perfectly trimmed hedges that looked like they had been measured with a ruler. The lawn was so green it almost hurt to look at, and not a single leaf dared to mar its surface. I rang the doorbell at exactly 10 in the morning, hoping to catch her at a reasonable hour. She answered within seconds, as if she had been waiting behind the door. Karen Mitchell was exactly what I had pictured, a woman in her mid-50s, with highlighted blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a blazer even though it was Saturday. Her eyes narrowed the moment she saw me, and before I could even introduce myself, she spoke with a tone that dripped condescension. Mr. Thompson, I presume. I've been expecting you. Most violators show up within 24 hours of receiving their notice, thinking they can talk their way out of consequences. Let me save you some time. The fine stands. The pond is under the HOA's exclusive oversight, and fishing disrupts the delicate ecosystem we've worked so hard to maintain. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with the board at our monthly meeting. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have important HOA business to attend to. She started to close the door, but I wedged my foot in the gap, maintaining my calm despite her dismissive attitude. Actually, Miss Mitchell, I've reviewed all the HOA documents, and there's no mention of fishing restrictions. The pond is listed on the county's public easement records, which means it's not technically under HOA control. I'd be happy to show you the documentation if you'd like to discuss this reasonably. Her face turned an interesting shade of red, and she yanked the door open wider, stepping out onto her porch like a general preparing for battle. Public easement? Let me tell you something about public easements, Mr. Thompson. I've been president of this HOA for 8 years. 8 years. I know every inch of this community, every rule, every covenant, and every resident who thinks they're too special to follow them. That pond has been under HOA protection since I took office. And if you don't like it, you can move. I pulled out my phone, bringing up the county records I had screenshotted earlier. According to these documents from the county recorder's office, the pond and a 15-foot perimeter around it are designated as a public access easement. Established in 1997 when the development was built, the HOA can maintain the area but cannot restrict legal activities like fishing. I kept my voice level and professional. Even as her face contorted with rage, she snatched the phone from my hand, squinting at the screen before shoving it back at me with enough force to make me step backward. Those records are outdated. The HOA board voted to assume full control 3 years ago. I have the minutes from that meeting in my files. Besides, even if what you're saying is true, which it isn't, I can still fine you for disturbing the peace, creating a nuisance, or any number of other violations I see fit. That's the beauty of being president. I interpret the rules. And right now I'm interpreting that you owe $2,000. Pay it, or I'll make it 4. Oh. She spun on her heel and marched back inside, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the decorative wreath hanging on it. Walking back to my house, I passed several neighbors working in their yards. When I made eye contact, they quickly looked away, busying themselves with already perfect flower beds. It wasn't until I reached the end of the street that someone finally approached me. An elderly man named George, who lived 3 houses down, glanced around nervously before speaking in a hushed tone. "You're the new guy who got fined for fishing, aren't you? Word travels fast around here. Listen, son. Karen's been pulling stunts like this for years. She fined the Johnsons $500 for having their trash cans visible from the street for 10 minutes after pickup. The Patel family got hit with a $1,000 fine for their daughter's chalk drawings on their own driveway. We've all just learned to pay up and stay quiet. It's easier than fighting her, but none of that sounds legal," I said, with genuine confusion. "Surely someone has challenged these fines before." George shook his head sadly. "You don't understand. Karen has connections. Her brother-in-law is a lawyer who sends threatening letters if anyone pushes back. She's got the board wrapped around her finger because she handpicked them all, and she keeps meticulous records of every tiny infraction. Cross her once, and suddenly you're getting fined for grass that's a 1/4 inch too tall, or a mailbox that's the wrong shade of black. Trust me, just pay the fishing fine and keep your head down." But keeping my head down had never been my style. That evening, I sat at my computer and began researching. First, I dove deep into the municipal codes governing HOA authorities in our county. Then I studied the state laws regarding easements and public access. The more I read, the more convinced I became that Karen was operating far outside her legal authority. But it wasn't until I started searching through online forums and local news archives that I struck gold. Buried in a 3-year-old discussion thread was a mention of Karen Mitchell being investigated for misuse of HOA funds at her previous community. The investigation had been dropped, but the timing lined up perfectly with when she became president at Willowbrook Estates. I spent the next 3 days building my case, as if I were preparing for trial. I filed formal requests with the county for all records related to our HOA and the pond easement. I reached out to former board members through social media, and several agreed to speak with me off the record. What they told me painted a picture of a woman who had systematically consolidated power, pushed out anyone who questioned her, and used HOA funds for everything from personal landscaping to vacation trips disguised as HOA conferences. But the smoking gun came when I obtained copies of the actual HOA meeting minutes through a public records request. The meeting where Karen claimed the board voted to take control of the pond, it never happened. The minutes for that date showed a routine discussion of lawn maintenance and nothing more. Armed with evidence, I decided to take a calculated risk. I printed out all my findings, organized them into a comprehensive folder, and mailed copies to every house in the neighborhood. But I didn't stop there. I also filed formal complaints with the City Code Enforcement Office, the County Commissioner's Office, and the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. The complaint detailed not just my fishing fine, but a pattern of illegal fines, misappropriation of funds, and abuse of power dating back years. I included receipts, meeting minutes, bank statements that residents had shared with me, and a timeline that showed how Karen had systematically violated both HOA bylaws and state law. The response was faster than I expected. Within 2 days, I received a call from the city's code enforcement director. They were opening a formal investigation into the HOA's practices. The county commissioner's office scheduled an emergency review of the easement status. But the real fireworks started when Karen found out about the complaints. She showed up at my door at 7 o'clock in the morning, pounding so hard I thought she might break it down. When I opened it, she was practically vibrating with rage, her face purple and her hands clenched into fists. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she snarled with such venom I could practically feel it. "Filing complaints, spreading lies, turning the neighborhood against me. I've worked too hard to let some newcomer destroy everything I've built. You want a war? You've got one. I'm calling an emergency board meeting tonight, and we're going to fine you for everything. Your grass is too long. Your car is parked crooked. Your mailbox is dirty. By the time I'm done, you'll owe this HOA $20,000. I remained calm, pulling out my phone to record the interaction. "Miss Mitchell, are you threatening to issue retaliatory fines because I filed legitimate complaints about your illegal activities?" She realized too late that I was recording. Her eyes widened before narrowing into slits. "That's not what I said. You're twisting my words. Turn that off right now, or I'll add harassment to your list of violations." She spun around and stormed off, but not before kicking over my recycling bin in a final act of petty rage. That evening's emergency board meeting was standing room only. Word had spread about the investigation, and residents who had been silent for years suddenly found their voices. The meeting agenda listed only one item discussing the Thompson fishing violation, but it quickly spiraled into something much bigger. As Karen called the meeting to order, I noticed 3 important additions to the audience: a representative from the City Code Enforcement Office, a county official, and, most surprisingly, a detective from the Economic Crimes Unit. Karen's confident demeanor faltered when she spotted them, but she pressed on with forced authority. "We're here tonight to address the malicious campaign being waged against this board by our newest resident," she began, her voice trembling. "Mr. Thompson has filed false complaints and spread libelous information throughout our community. I move that we impose the maximum allowable fines for his numerous violations." But before she could continue, the city representative stood up. "Actually, Miss Mitchell, we're here to address the complaints filed against you and this board. Our preliminary investigation has found significant irregularities in your enforcement practices and financial management." What followed was the most satisfying hour of my life. The city representative laid out their findings in devastating detail. The pond was indeed a public easement and had never been under HOA control. Karen had no authority to issue fines without full board approval, which she had never obtained. Most damning, they had found evidence of over $50,000 in HOA funds that had been redirected to unauthorized expenses, many of which benefited Karen personally. The county official confirmed that not only was my fishing fine invalid, but every fine Karen had issued in the past 3 years was legally unenforceable. Residents could demand full refunds with interest. Karen tried to defend herself, her voice growing more shrill with each accusation. "These are all misunderstandings. I've done everything for the good of this community. These receipts were for HOA business. That conference in Hawaii was essential for learning modern HOA management techniques, but her explanations fell apart under scrutiny." The detective asked pointed questions about specific transactions, and Karen's answers became increasingly incoherent. Finally, she turned to the board members she had handpicked, expecting support. Instead, they sat in stony silence, already calculating their own legal exposure. The climax came when I was invited to present my evidence. I walked to the front of the room, my folder thick with documentation. But instead of launching into a lengthy presentation, I simply said with measured calm, "I have here copies of every illegal fine issued, every misappropriated fund, every falsified meeting minute. But rather than go through them all, I think the city has an announcement to make." The city representative stood again, pulling out an official document. "Karen Mitchell, based on our investigation and the evidence provided, the city of Willowbrook is issuing you a fine of $10,000 for multiple violations of municipal codes regarding HOA governance, illegal enforcement activities, and misuse of authority." The room erupted. Residents cheered, some even standing to applaud. Karen's face cycled through every shade of red before settling on a ghostly white. She gripped the podium with both hands, her knuckles white as she struggled to process what was happening. "You can't do this," she whispered, her voice broken. "I am the president. I have immunity. The HOA charter protects me." The detective stepped forward then, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Actually, Miss Mitchell, immunity doesn't cover criminal activities. We'll be conducting a full audit of the HOA finances. I suggest you contact an attorney." As the implications sank in, Karen's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled completely. She looked around the room at the faces of neighbors she had terrorized for years, searching for a single sympathetic expression and finding none. Her shoulders sagged as she realized her reign was over. The board immediately called for her resignation, and when she refused to respond, they voted unanimously to remove her effective immediately. The $10,000 fine was just the beginning. The full audit would likely reveal more criminal charges, and the civil lawsuits from residents seeking refunds would drain whatever resources she had left. As security escorted her from the building, she turned back one last time, her eyes finding mine in the crowd. The look she gave me should have been withering, but instead, it was simply defeated. The mighty Karen Mitchell, terror of Willowbrook Estates, had finally faced consequences for her actions, and the price was exactly $10,000, plus the destruction of the tiny empire she had built on the backs of her neighbors.